Members of the public, we're going to call this meeting to order. This time we'll do a roll call.
Steve Christopoli.
Here.
Robin Fisher.
Here.
Josiah Gattle.
Here.
Robert Jordan.
Here.
Susan Hodgers. Here. James Minus.
Here.
Yvonne Minus.
Here.
Kendall Moore.
Here.
Todd.
Here.
Thank you, Todd. Can you pronounce your name for us?
Pokriva.
Pogriva. Sue Schmidt.
Here.
Jason Steele. He should be calling in by phone. However, he is out of the country and may not be able to connect. John Weiler.
Here.
Alberta Wilson.
Here.
Pat Woodard.
Here.
Rich Workman.
Here.
Okay, you have a quorum and
All right.
everyone is present and accounted
We-
for except for Mr. Steele.
All right, we do have a quorum. At this time, I'll ask for an approval of minutes from the March 16th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Show those minutes approved. And at this time, also, members, if you would, you'll notice there's a green light on in front of you. Let's keep those on so it keeps everybody live. So with that, Jim, who's going to do the presentation? You're going to do it, or Abby?
We're going to have James here from our IT department.
Okay.
Come on up, James.
James, you're on.
Yeah, James is going to lead you all through the software that we have available for redistricting to give you an idea how it works.
Hello, everybody. Like Jim said, I'm from the IT department, and we're just going to kind of go a little outline of how the redistricting software works and kind of go over some of the functionality behind it. Some of you might be asking, what is the redistricting, ESRI redistricting online software? It's a web-based application that allows you to create, design, edit, publish, review, and compare district plans based on census statistics and geographical data. This is just a definition of some of the geographic census data we'll be working with. A few things to take note: the census blocks that are the smallest units we will be able to edit in the software. The census block groups are roughly around 700 residents per group, and the census tract is roughly around 4,000 residents. A lot of this will be pretty straightforward. We're going to kind of break the presentation out into, just some outline stuff and then a live demo, and then we'll kind of open it up to questions after that. There's four kind of main components to the software. There's a software ribbon, which is kind of like the main control, a map viewer, which allows us to view the census data and district boundaries. There's an information sidebar that just displays the digital information that tie directly with the map viewer. There's also an attribute table, which allows you to view the demographic census data based on the settings you choose to view. This is just a screenshot of the map viewer. This is where all the magic happens. So when we do our editing on the district boundaries, this is primarily the viewer we're going to use. This is the information sidebar. It's combined of four tabs. There's a table of contents that allows us to view and turn off all the data we input into the software. We also have a search tab where we can search for Archon ESRI data online that we can also bring into the software. We have a map legend and then a identify tab, which allows us to view demographic data based on a selection, and it also allows you to search for preset places like Melbourne or Merritt Island or that sort of thing. This is an example of the attribute table. A few things to take in note here is All these demographic settings are directly tied into kind of our demographic settings button, where we can view them by sum or percentage, depending on your guys' need. One thing to also note in this attribute window, they have a lock toggle feature. So say we're editing District 1 and you guys have made all the edits you want, and we don't want to make any more edits to it during that particular meeting, we can lock that district down so it doesn't accidentally get edited throughout the course of the meeting accidentally. Another thing to keep in mind here, if you notice this ideal field, if one of our goals by redistricting is to balance out the districts by total population, this ideal number will be if we were trying to balance them out to the single person, this would be the ideal number target number we'd want to shoot for. I guess I could go to the next slide. This is the software ribbon. This is just the file tab, nothing too exciting here. It's basically just save, open, very similar to a lot of softwares like Word or Excel that I'm sure everybody has used in the past. This view tab, it allows you to kind of customize and toggle some of the views within the map viewer. There's also a few editing functions here that I'll briefly go over. It allows you to swap districts. So say we edit District 1 and you actually want to name it District 2. Instead of going through a lot of manual edits, you can just quick swap those in and out with one simple button. Say we have 2 districts that we want to combine into one. We can do that with this the Join Districts button. So there's some editing tools on this ribbon, but it's mostly used for customizing the data in the viewer. The next tab, this is where we'll probably using the most. It's the Create tab. There's a lot of functionality on this tab. We have our Demographics button, which is the settings that tie directly to the attribute table. We also have a lot of our selection tools here in this redistricting panel. We have your typical pan and zooms. We have a scale bar that we have another slide on that kind of goes into more detail about that. And we'll also kind of touch on that a little bit in the live demo a little bit later. There's also a themes tool, which we have another slide on that kind of goes in further detail. And then we have an add contents, which will allow us to add other GIS data that we can use as references when we're doing our redistricting edits. So like I mentioned previously, this is the scale bar. This yellow indicator directly ties into the zoom level of the map viewer. And then these purple indicators just provide the breaks in which geographic census data you are viewing at the time. So as an example, the picture on your left, you can see the indicator is in the block segment. So this is the census block levels, which are the smallest units we have available in the software. And then you can see as we zoom out past the first purple indicator, we're in the block group level, and these are the roughly 700 residents per census data geographical area. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, we can kind of go more into it in the live demo. This is the themes tool. This can be pretty handy if you want to see specific geographic information at the census block level. What this allows you to do is say we want to see the number of, just using this example, say we want to see the number of non-Hispanic whites per census block in our map viewer. It might be a little hard to see, but there is numbers there that tell you the total population for that particular census block. And then the legend bar here kind of breaks that up further. You can actually use two labels. So say you wanted to see the non-Hispanic whites against the total, you could just click on the second label button and you would also see that. And like I said, we can go a little more in depth in the live demo in case I'm going too fast or that sort of thing. The next is the review tab. This allows you to create plan and district charts and graphs. It also has the data integrity checks, which are just built in the software that allows you to kind of make sure you're assigning all the particular cell blocks in the county. It'll shoot up an error if you don't have those all assigned. And also there's a check that for like connectivity and like multi-part. So it just allows you to kind of just check the spatial integrity of any plan you create. It also has the reports, which we'll get to a little bit later. And then there's a functionality to compare two plans. So say we have a plan from one redistricting committee meeting and we want to compare that to another one we create, this tool will allow us to do that. This is a list of the built-in data integrity checks. I won't spend too much time on this. Just as an example, they have the dual assignment check. This just allows to make sure you're not assigning a particular spatial area to two districts. The null assignment is pretty self-explanatory. It just makes sure there are no unassigned geographies. And then the connectivity is the one I mentioned previously, having kind of multi-part districts. So say you had a large District 1, but then also accidentally assigned a certain geographical area, District 1 as well. This check would allow you to catch that. This is a list of all the reports. I won't bore you with that. I'll run some as an example later on, but feel free to check these. There's a few pretty neat ones. The assigned district splits actually allows you to see the demographic data based on like the I believe it's like the voting VTDs. I believe it's like the voting precinct geographic areas. So, but we can provide examples of this based on request whenever. The next is the Share tab. This just allows you to attach additional files and comments to a particular plan. It also allows us to kind of export any plan into geographical data that we can then share. With like ArcGIS Online or hard copy maps or that sort of thing. I guess I can go into the live demo unless anybody has any questions.
I have one, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So are we going to have access to this individually, or how does this?
No, see, you have to have a license for the software. We can share the plans several different ways, and we can kind of go into what makes sense for everybody. But as individually, you wouldn't be able to edit it. We have a few ideas on how to share it to make it as user-friendly as possible.
So we only can do it here?
Yes, I do have a way to where you can use ArcGIS Online. We can send you a similar application that you can create bookmarks, draw your own shape files, and then email that to me if you want a particular area to be reviewed directly in the meeting, or I can create a plan off of those bookmarks and share them with you.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that you do have several ideas in
Yes.
which to suggest to.
As far as sharing the plan? Yes, I
Can
guess
you
I
share that with us now?
Yes, I
Some
can.
of them anyway.
I can.
Thank you.
No problem. This is a web application I put together just kind of as a test with the existing districts. This is just an initial kind of brainstorming on, in case you guys wanted to be able to send me geographical areas that you want to take a look at or prioritize, and that we can add into the software later. I guess I can just zoom down into here. Say we wanted to bookmark this particular area to bring it up as a, in the software to review first thing in the next meeting. What you could do is draw a polygon here. Then select it. Oh, come on. And then that we would be able to allow you to export this into a JSON file, which then I can turn into geographic data that I can import into the redistricting software. I know it's not ideal, but this is one option we've come up with so far.
Jim?
If I can interrupt, Mr. Chair, too. And James is right. I mean, it's kind of up to the committee how you want to do it, but I mean, there'll be ways. I'm sure we can set it up on the webpage that after a meeting that you want to post a couple, you know, you come up with an idea and you guys want to take a look at it for a few days, we can post it on the webpage, and so that way you can take a look at individual plans. It's kind of on how, all you want to decide of us putting it out there for everybody else to see. But there's a few different ways, so. You won't be able to edit it because there's only limited licenses, but at least it's be out there to take a look at.
Okay, because he alluded to that, by the
Yes.
way.
Yeah, oh yeah, he's got,
Yeah.
yeah, the IT folks, and we got some of the IT folks here that I didn't get to introduce. They have some different ways of, depending on how you guys want to do it, I'm sure they'll be able to, I don't want to, work the software so that way you can see ideas and plans outside the meeting.
Okay.
Sue?
Yes, well, first of all, I apologize for coughing. I don't have COVID, I had 2 shots.
Gee, thanks.
But I was just wondering, when you're doing this, and
Do you want me
you're
to go
doing, showing District 1.
What's that?
And you're showing the little out parcel or out part there, and I assume that's Cocoa.
Yes, I believe
Is
so.
what that is. A lot of people would not necessarily know where that is unless they happen to be familiar with that particular district. It would be very helpful if you could show the exact street. If it goes over to Fisk Boulevard and it ends on the west side of Fisk Boulevard or whatever, so that we know where that
Yeah, we have different GIS laters we can add into this web application.
Jim, you want to backfill?
Sorry for interrupting again. James will show you in the demo, yeah, where you can see the streets and the blocks, and then as you draw down, he'll be able to show you all that information.
And then when are
Yeah.
you anticipating getting the new numbers now?
When the Census Bureau had their big press release, press conference for the congressional apportionment, they still said September is their target date.
And it's the end of September
Yeah.
as of right now.
Yeah,
But that's what
exact-
you said,
yes.
and I didn't know if that had changed.
I have not seen anything that should change
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
Any further questions before we move on? Yes, sir?
Mr. Chairman, would there be access to this if we came into a specific facility to, say, work with the software? Would there be a computer with the software available to us?
Yeah, my primary tasking is to focus on redistricting, so you are more than welcome to come to my desk, make an appointment anytime to create plans, play with the software, have any questions, I'm always available.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Abby,
if I may,
yes.
just to remind that we do need to be concerned about the sunshine, so it'd just be individuals, one-on-one, if you want to work on the software.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't want to discuss or provide each other's comments outside of a meeting.
Yeah. Further questions? No? You want to go move to the next step?
Yeah, I'll just start kind of demonstrating some of the functionality. I was just going to brief demo kind of how we would edit some of the districts in live time. Say we wanted to add this neighborhood from District 1 to District 2, we would just grab it using this selection. Come on. Sorry. And then we can view the proposed changes. One of the nice things about this attribute table, it'll actually show you the differences and the changes per demographic setting that you're proposing to do by these selections, and then you can just assign it. No, I accidentally unassigned them, I'm sorry. Let's just redo that. So now these are all in District 2. The next thing I wanted to kind of go over is how to compare plans. So let me open up, I set up a compare plan, open. Let's just use this one. So this is if we wanted to compare two plans and zoom in. This is basically these cross-stitch patterns tell you the areas between the two plans that are different. Also in this comparison table, it'll actually show you the demographic data that changes based on the differences between the two plans as well. I guess I can go, does anybody have any questions on this while I'm here, I guess?
The data that's in there, was that 2010 census?
Yeah, sorry, I guess I should have mentioned that earlier. This is what you're seeing right now is our existing districts based on the 2010 census data. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
So when we start working with the software, and I mentioned it at the last meeting, can we put in a dummy number for the census, assuming based on the best information we have from other sources over the last year, so that we have a good basis to start from? My guess would be if we do that we probably wouldn't be any different than maybe by 15 or 20,000 when the final census number comes out. But this would allow us to have something closer to reality to work with instead of looking at the 10-year-old data?
Yeah, unfortunately, the census data is built into the software, and until it gets updated, we don't necessarily have a way to add those numbers in there. We can add, we actually just recently got some estimates from 2018 data, but if you look at the margin of error of some of those, it's not super reliable data, and we would only be able to add it into the software as a kind of reference layer. We would lose all the functionality of the software.
Jim, you want to add to that?
Mr. Wheeler, I was going to show, after James is done, I was going to show a slide, not through this software, but the American Community, we did some research, the American Community Survey, I think the data I have is 2019, they have 2018 in this software. I was going to show a census tract, but it's 16,000 people in the census tract, and the data error was plus or minus 1,600. So it's like that one happened to be like an 8%, I've seen some 5%. So maybe the county population, the error may not be as bad, but it's when you start drilling down, then you get the little bit margin error. I'll show you when James is done. I pulled up just a couple little informations on that.
Okay. Go ahead, James.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to kind of demonstrate, I guess, is the themes button. We kind of touched on a little bit in the presentation. Let me scroll to an appropriate area. So like I said, this just allows us to kind of drill down in the demographic data based on, a particular setting. Let me bring this down. So it's a little hard to see. Let me move some of this stuff out of here. So the nice thing is all the streets, we can add different base maps if we want to go by imagery, but I believe the street view will be handy for, keeping a reference on where we're at. And as you can see here, this is just, a breakdown of the non-Hispanic whites in this particular area in case you wanted to use this for editing the districts, on, down to the block level. Is there any questions with this? It's pretty straightforward, I think.
You're an IT guy, you would say. Let me ask you something, because I guess the concern that I have, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that we really don't have good data, number one.
Right.
And number two, I tend to like to want to play with things. And you're telling me I can't play with it unless I come to your office. So is there a piece of software that we all could have that is maybe just a viewer versus having a full up?
Yeah, I think, do you want to answer this one, or?
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I was going to show you at least one I found. Yeah, you guys are jumping at me. There is, and somebody suggested, there is District Builder. It's a website. It's really designed for state and federal, but I'll show you, I was able to play and carve 5 districts. It's still got 2010 data, but once the 2020 data gets loaded, you can actually draw districts with it. And I only went down to the census tract. I'm sure you can go down to block group. And then we haven't looked enough if there's a way to, where you can export it and give it to James, and then he can load it in. You have to sign up on email, but it's free.
And that's what the legislature uses as well. It directs its members to that to give examples as well. So it will be, lagging. It won't happen until this happens as far as the numbers go. So we're going to be crunched. When the time comes, we're definitely going to be crunched for time. But, we're playing the cards we're dealt, so. James?
Yep. Let me clear this.
As a reminder, when you are speaking, be sure to speak into the microphones. This meeting is being recorded, so we want to make sure everything is heard, so.
Did you just chastise me?
No, I was just told. I'm a good follower.
I just noticed you walked over to you and looking at me, so.
Sorry, Mr. Jordan. Yeah,
So we'll share microphones where we have to.
All right, thank you.
The next thing I wanted to briefly demo is just some of our data integrity checks. I added in a plan here that has some built-in errors, so we could just see how that works. The null assignment check will probably always go off for all of our plans because we're along the coast and some of these census blocks are just water, so we're never really going to assign those to a district. The connectivity check went off. And let's just zoom into there. So it's telling us District 1 has 2 pieces. So obviously we have this piece right here that's labeled as District 1, and then this piece right here. So this is just a data integrity check. Say we accidentally, or I accidentally slip up and make an error. This will catch that. Let's close that out. And then also I just wanted to brief demo some of the reports. I'll just do a basic one. The reports, basically, we can add any field based on the demographic settings we want, so we can customize them based on PDF or Excel files. They don't take too long to run, so if you have any specific reports you want to customize based on particular fields, we can do that. I'll just run one of them, and that's kind of what they look at like. These reports are built in. There's not a whole lot of customization besides just, deciding what demographic settings we want. But there's enough reports that we should be able to get you the information you're looking for on one of them. The next thing is, and then they have some built-in features where we can go by plan or district for pie charts and kind of, pie charts, everybody likes those, right?
Yes.
I think that's the end of my demo. That's a lot of the functionality that I think would be useful to you guys during the redistricting meetings. Obviously, if you have any questions or want to take the time to stop by my desk and play around a little more with the software. Like I said, my primary tasking is this effort, so I'm more than happy and available to help anybody or, assist in any way.
But keeping in mind, between now and the time we get that data, we're dealing with 10-year-old data. So,
Right.
I mean, it's certainly something, folks could go in and play with it to understand how it works and get familiarized with it, but knowing that, clearly the data there is not accurate and up to date, so. Josiah?
Mr. Chairman, is your contact information listed somewhere that we can get in contact with you to arrange that appointment?
We'll make sure that gets out to everybody, yeah.
Okay.
Further questions?
If we have the hours also, his hours, from 9 to 5, 10 to 2, or
I'm in the office every day from 8 to 5.
8 to 5, okay.
Yeah.
But we'll be sure to send out an email with his information, contact information and hours for sure. Further questions? If not, Jim, you're up.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I forgot to add, we have Lois and Joanne here from the IT department too. So, I mean, it's a group effort, so we're and they are all available to make sure once the data comes rolling in, we can work, as best we can for y'all. What I've done, you asked at the last meeting, what data we have available or what there might be out there besides 2010. Now, this is just, all I did is just pull up just a couple of slides and examples. This is American Community Survey, and if you give me a second to scroll on down. And what this is the Census Bureau keeps some of you may have been asked questions over the years in between census, and what this is more data than just 10 people live here. It's 10 people live here. This is how they commute. This is how they work. This is how they go to school. This is their income level. And so what this is it shows it's a 5-year rolling average. The last data I was able to find is 2019. So it's a little hard to tell on the screen, but what I did is I highlighted Census Tract 712, which is the one that we're sitting in today. The south area right here, that's Wickham Road, and then this area is Port St. John. So you see it's a large census tract. And I picked that one on purpose to show you something here in just a second to lead on. But if you, and I put this in a table form, you can go on site. This is through the Census Bureau, and you can click through and you can pull data. So what I did for 712 here is I pulled the data, the social and demographic data, and there it is, Census 712. So you see right here, the estimated population in this census tract for 2019 is 16,000 people, and the margin of error is plus or minus 16,000. So the Census Bureau, I didn't do the math, what's that, 8%, 9%, plus or minus margin of error. And then as you go through the different data, depending on what they want, total population, so you have the African American population, they're estimating there's 314 in the track, but the margin of error is plus or minus 416. So in this one track, it's 100%. I mean, you can, the larger you go, the less error you're going to have under this data. The smaller you go and the more data you're drilling into, you're going to have a larger error. So that's what you have. IT was able to pull up some information from 2018, but it would be the same base data that you have that I'm showing you right now in table format. So I want to show you at least, that's kind of the best data that's out there. It's all an estimate. There was then questions about redistricting software. Somebody did let me know about District Builder, but as I was doing research, I came through. This is somebody's blog, and what it is a bunch. And if you want the link, we can send it to you. But it's a bunch of different redistricting websites. And it's a little hard to see on this screen. The interesting thing is they talk about cost and whether it's free or not. But right in here, you can see District Builder. There, and then you see the different ArcGIS that's similar to the software we have. There's a district.org that's kind of free. If you're interested in the site, I can at least send you guys the link and you can at least look at it. And so what I was doing, and I went through District Builder myself and played around with it. And this is still, and I just drew, doesn't matter, I just started at one point. This is just, I just drew 5 districts. And I'll be straight out honest, is I thought, all right, there's 600,000 population, so I was trying to draw districts at 600,000 divided by 5, 120, and I ran out of people by the time I got to district number 5. And so I did the math, I go, well, that's 543, so that's definitely 2010 numbers of what District Builder is working off of. But the software itself is pretty intuitive. If I just pull in a little bit, I'm just zooming in. Well, let me click on it. It worked in a rehearsal, but you can do it by blocks. There we go. So there's all the different census blocks, and so you could literally, if I want to draw District 2, I can. I can't do this quite right, but you can actually draw yourself and come up with different districts, different ways, and then there's different data you can pull up depending what you want to know on the district. It even has some tests. In terms of there's a couple other free, but in terms of free software, even I could use it. So that should tell you quite a bit. It's pretty easy to use. It's pretty easy to draw. And it, like the chair said, it's what the state uses. So District Builder seems to be what it is. But everything that I was able to look at and play with on the list that I could get into that wasn't, cost money or real intensive registration, it's all 2010 data, or it's really meant for congressional or state. It doesn't let me drill down enough to county. And like I said, District Builder is really meant for state, but you just pretend you only have 5 representatives that are only in Brevard County, and then you can draw it that way. So that's a little bit of the data we found. And what the last thing I want to show is, I have it over here. The 2020, now you're going to really need to put on your reading glasses for this. Yeah, this is, let's see here, wait a minute, let me get, so these are census tract, and as James showed you, there's block groups and everything, and in the old days, census tract was the easiest data you can get to, but what I want to show you is right here is 712 that I showed you earlier, which includes, the Vieira area. In the 2010 census, it starts at Wickham Road, goes all the way up here to basically 528. Well, if you look, the Census Bureau has actually divided up. So you have, I'm pointing on the screen instead of pointing here, sorry. So you have Vieira is kind of divided up right here. You have another chunk of Vieira. If you're familiar with the Satellite Boulevard area in West Canaveral Groves, that's been drawn into its own census data. So what you have, as far as I can tell, with the American Community Survey data, it's off the entire 712 census tract. But what you're going to be doing when you're drawing your districts is all this data will be divided up between all the smaller tracts. So even while the data is an estimate, it's on a larger picture. It's not on the smaller picture. So between the margin of error, you'll have a trouble with that. And then I would think you have some trouble is that you have census tracts that are bigger data and you won't be able to draw more precise ideas. That's a quick summary of what we've been able to find over the last couple months of digging around, going through different websites and everything. So I got to tell you, if you look at my web browser at the county employee, you would think the only thing I'm worried about is redistricting. But I mean, there's been lots of stuff trying to drill down, trying to help you guys and show the different things. Sure. And I should add up, let's see, there has been 52 new census tracts drawn in Brevard County. So that's probably close to half. I think the number is 110, 120, something like that. So there's been a lot of change between 2010 and 2020. Census tracts are designed based on geographic and economic units, and as James says, they tend to keep it a certain population size. So there's been a lot of growth. And I will tell you, I'm looking at my little highlighted sheet. There's been changes even up. They've divided up Mims, Scottsmore. There's quite a bit in Cocoa and Port St. John. A little bit in Melbourne, and obviously Palm Bay, and even the South Mainland Barefoot Bay area. They divided it up even a little bit further.
Todd, you have a question?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. First, I think James and Jim have done a good job presenting to us the software capability and the data that is available, which unfortunately isn't accurate or reliable for our purpose at this time. If we're to proceed with any efforts right now, I think we're really just spinning our wheels. We're wasting our time. And, we're at a disadvantage, but we do know the census data is going to be released in late September. And as you said, Mr. Chairman, we're going to be crunched, and it is what it is. But, there's not much we can do in the interim that's going to be anyway accurate. So I think we all just need to be prepared that we're going to be meeting quite frequently, and it's going to be an intense effort. But I would make a motion that we defer this effort and defer future committee meetings until such time as the census data is released.
Yes, and you know, to follow up on that, and I was going to make comments on that, but
I'll second that.
yes, and you know, so what we have is is it, I guess, Jim, it's like the third Tuesday of every, or the second Tuesday, I don't know how you have it, but
Yeah.
we have them reserved so that we know that we have a block of space to utilize, but there's certainly nothing for us to meet on between now and, you know, maybe the September meeting, we have a better feel for when we're going to get that data. We can get everybody back in here to, you know, kind of gather back up, refresher course on where we are. Certainly, if you know, you have the opportunity to go sit with James and, you know, mess around with the program, it's certainly worthwhile effort to do that, so you're not trying to learn it later when that opportunity comes. But Todd, to your point, we're going to be cramming, but we're going to be, you know, it's going to be one of those things where we're going to have to meet a little more frequently come September, or, you know, the end of September and throughout October. We have to have this to the commissioners first week of November?
Yeah, you have to
okay.
give us enough time to advertise it properly, and then we also need to submit it to the supervisor so they can review.
Sure.
Because it impacts how they do their business, so you need to allow them to have some comment period too.
Okay. So we will be, you know, we'll be on a short clock, but we're all capable, and James is certainly capable of managing us, hopefully. You'll have a sign-in sheet. But you know, yes, we are going to be dealing with a challenge there, and we do have a motion on the floor to, you know, hold off on meeting. I would say we, you know, kind of amend that to make it to where we can look at things come September, because if we do get some information early to think that we may get, you know, this data in late September, then we, you know, can maybe look and see if we can find a space to meet as a committee and get started as soon as we get that. But every intention to start as soon as we get the data. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, are we, based on your research outside of the census data, is it somewhere around 6.25 population, you think, or do you have any idea?
Bieber, University of Florida Business, Economic, I never remember the last.
That will be accurate if it's coming out of
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah, actually. Wait.
Whatever they say.
As I got a daughter working for them, I agree with you, sir. Their middle projection for 2020 was like 602 for the county, 602,000, somewhere around there.
Mr. Chairman, so if we were to assume and they were to work off of that number, and if this board could meet now to have some conversations about whether or not how you want to, if 602 is a number, how do you want to break up districts? If you don't do anything really radical, you would probably add, you know, I think you're averaging about 110,000, 108,000 a district now.
43 divided by like 8, yeah, 108, 109, somewhere in that
So
neighborhood.
you average 108 now, you're probably going to go to 120. So you got 12,000. So 12,000 need to be picked up in District 1, probably 20,000 taken out of District 4 because of Todd and all of the air growth. But, and you know, if you take the lines where they are now, and if they could, James and Jim and them can start playing around, if this board feels like we don't want to do anything really, you know, try to add 12,000 people, keeping a district in whole, they could probably start playing with that. And so when we came back, we were, you know, we already had an idea.
I think that's possible. Unfortunately, as you say, because of Todd, a lot of that's going to be here. We don't know where those unless you can, I don't know, can you tell where those population growths were to know to where to go pick them up? And that's, I think, part of the, I mean, to your point, I think you can shrink in some districts, swell in others, and, you know, and probably make it work. You're going to be guessing. I mean, without question, I think you're guessing no matter what, just because you don't know where your population growth was.
Yeah,
I mean, precisely.
Yeah, we're just here to draw at your direction. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. But no, to your
yeah.
point, that is certainly something that can be done by taking the existing map, putting it on there. But again, we don't know where those population growths came from. So I think it's all speculation until we have the exact numbers. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll tell you that, in my opinion, is that there's so many assumptions that have to go into that, because it's not just about population, right? It's about, that it's a lot of work for the staff or anybody to do to just throw it out completely when the data comes in. Outside of learning how to use it, like some of the folks have talked about, guessing will end up just being, in my opinion, a lot of wasted effort, because you don't know where they are. You don't know, you can't drill down. You're literally just redrawing 2010 data, and I think at the end of the day you'll just end up throwing it out, and they'll end up spinning their wheels for a lot. I'm not trying to contradict you. Normally I would never do that to you, sir. I just.
But I do think
There's a lot of spinning
when the
wheels.
time comes, doing an overlay of the current map, it would be an easy thing for them to do based, once they get that data. But I don't think there's anything that can be done until that information is put into that system. But yes.
Yeah, I just think that I was on the redistricting committee before, and, which means I'm really old at this point.
See.
But I think it's really spinning wheels at this time to even look. And I get where you're coming from, but when we're going to do something, we need the facts. And, I mean, having been that route before, and some folks wanted things that were not facts, and it just didn't work out well for a while. I think it's to everyone's benefit, no matter what district it is, to have the actual numbers. And maybe the feds will be really good and let us know in August. That would be great. And I think that's what Steve was kind of referring to, that if they come in earlier, hey, we can be ready. Just notify us and we can be here.
Josiah.
I fully agree with Todd on the waiting to meet again, but I have a couple of points of information that I would appreciate if staff could look into, especially because they have been invoked by different members of the county commission. I know that Representative Tobias had mentioned wanting a minority-majority district, that if we could address staff to go look into the consequences of what that would be, what the rules would be on that, and distribute that to all of us. That's something we're going to be discussing in this committee, as well as the taxation consequences and what demographic changes might do to taxation consequences. I think we all want to have relatively even distribution of tax dollars to various parts of the county and make sure that everything stays at certain levels and not accidentally draw a district that may have disproportionate lower income and therefore lower services.
Sure. So why don't you phrase those in two separate motions? I think those are valid things to be looking at, but I think they need to, Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, we need to be in a motion?
I would ask for a motion, yes.
So.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, well, yes. I would like,
You want me to amend?
yeah, we need to amend yours because we don't want to be stuck to a date certain on, when we get that data. I would like to be able to say, at the call of the chair, so that if Jim calls me and says in late August, we're going to have data in September, I'd like to be able to call a meeting.
So amended.
Okay. Do we have a second?
You do.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Show that motion passes. Now we'll, yes, sir.
Can I use this? Yes, sir. Just a point of order, we had a motion and Sue seconded it. So really, since he just modified his motion, she should just
I have to
agree.
accept the motion.
Right, and then
It doesn't need another second.
you don't need another second.
Okay. Yes.
And
Robert's
you
Robert's
accept
Rules of Order. And she accepts the motion, so, okay. Now we're in correct posture? Well, you need we need to do two separate motions on yours.
So I motion to direct staff to look into the rules and consequences of a minority-majority district in Brevard.
Okay. Do we have a second? Well, I think you're already on. All right, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes? Okay, yeah.
I'm trying to understand actually where we're going. I understand the data thing, and we should wait for the data, but is part of this committee's responsibility to come up with options as far as districts is concerned, as it relates to minority, majority, 5 districts versus 6 districts versus 7 districts? Is that where we're going?
Well, your charter says 5 districts, correct? So
So it's only 5?
it's only 5 districts. So
Okay.
we're working within those parameters. But he's looking for information to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, to understand what that means and what the legalities are of that, because he says that one of the commissioners has talked about that, so he's looking for information for that purpose.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. At a previous county commission meeting, Mr. Tobias went on for a few minutes about his desire to create a majority-minority district. My understanding is that there are certain special rules from what I've looked at, and I would just like a understanding of what the rules would be if we chose to go down that path, so that if any members of this committee wanted to propose something like that, we would have a understanding of the rules before we began that discussion, and we were not crunched for time doing both drawing the districts and trying to understand the rules.
Understood. Yes.
Would you please include in that you have the attorney's review of that, because it was always my understanding you couldn't do certain things based on sex and whether someone's a minority or, I mean, that there's certain laws and rules on this particular, on redistricting that you can't, doesn't mean that you can't fit it in, okay? And however you want to fit it in.
Well, I mean,
But-
that was part of our review at the initial meeting, and I think, Abby can
Right.
certainly brush us up on that, but I think what he's asking for is something completely different. And I don't think, and Abby, correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong, I don't think that we can, or it's for the betterment of the committee if things like this are done in a motion versus him coming to you and just asking that question.
Yes.
Is that preferred?
Absolutely. I would prefer to have a motion from the committee, directing myself and staff to research, and I can put into memo form so you can answer those questions back instead of having individual questions come after the meeting. I'm here to help, but I want to make sure the committee agrees with what I'm actually spending the time to do, so that's fine, perfect.
Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so what I was trying to say, I agree with Todd's motion earlier, but also from a time-saving standpoint, unless we're going to make some type of huge change like Commissioner Tobias is asking for, then I really do believe that you could add 10,000 to everything and come up with a decent line. If you're going to do if this committee's desire is to shake up the whole thing and have what's it, one drawing I saw, total left side of the whole county, then we ought to probably decide before we get to September whether that's the desire of this board, is to really shake up the way redistricting has been done for 100 years. I mean, I think that it was probably done similar to like it's been done because the previous redistrict people have been on the board and have looked at a lot of the issues that we're going to look at and already decided that, the way it's drawn out is pretty fair and equal and all that good stuff. So
The beauty of having water on one side of you.
Yeah, the
makes
beauty
it,
of-
makes
yeah.
it pretty easy.
Yeah,
No, certainly, and I think that's that's the purview of this committee, and that's a discussion, that can certainly be had, but I think until we know where those growth of, the population growth took place, it's going to be really hard to move. I mean, I think we can speculate for this district, where to move certain lines, but that's it is a dart at a dartboard, I mean, to some extent. But I think, to your point, if that's the pleasure of this committee, when we get that data, plugging in to the current overlay of the districts and seeing where it is, and then moving lines, quickly in that fashion won't be hard to do at that point in time. I just don't know how we could possibly do it with any sense of accuracy until, that time comes about. But that's, again, that's a discussion for this board to have and understand. But certainly I don't know how we can do it unless somebody can tell me differently how we can do that with any certainty until we have that data. Now, I know that we're talking about a motion that he has on the floor right now. Is there anybody else that has a question or a comment on the motion that's been put on the floor? Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of expand upon Mr. Gaddle's comment about the majority-minority district. I believe it was the March 9th meeting, the county commission, that Commissioner Tobias proposed that topic. So I think, as Sue said earlier, that we want to be ready, and we want to try to get as much information as possible about that. It was a pretty big discussion and details, and it sounds great, but I think in other counties and other places that I've lived, that when people propose it, the majority minority, it sounds great, but in fact, it actually kind of backfires, because then you have the minority party or race is localized to just one area. So they're actually like the lone person on the board. So I think that's what I think you mean.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, and I'm not sure where we are, but I am amenable to adding attorneys to the staff instruction that Sue mentioned. But yes, my understanding is that Mr. Tobias has asked for this, and I would like to respect that ask for an exploration of this, and just understand what rules would be invoked and how we would go about this, so that we're not waiting until September and then also researching a complete redo of maps instead of moving simple lines that would be involved with a potential minority-majority district, and what the rules would be on this if we chose to pursue it.
So you're looking for basically a legal reading of what it means for this?
To understand what it would mean for us, what rules would apply.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I think he just wants to be fair. If it was drawn, it would just take a certain demographic of people and put them in one district, and that wouldn't really be fair. And they would be the lone vote on for example, the county commission, so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I actually don't think that's what the motion says at all. Because I thought all we're saying is there's a county commissioner said this, and we all just want to know what the rules are so that we don't screw up when it comes out. And isn't that what you're saying? Just what are the rules so when we draw a majority district, well, we can't do that because these are the rules, or we can do that here. The rules. We're not trying to not do it or not do it. I wasn't under the assumption that there was a thought other than because you brought it up, you want to know the rules pertain to that. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Workman. My understanding is there's certain variances that are allowed that you would be additional to the, I believe, general 3% variance across districts that are allowed. There's certain requirements as far as we have to state certain amounts of intent or do it for a specific purpose. It can't be considered packing or cracking in any way. There's additional requirements. I just want to kind of understand those as a body, that if we were to go about this, what would the necessary consequences be to accomplish this so that everyone can be on the same page and have the same information.
Okay.
Should this board
Yes, ma'am.
That's right.
That makes good sense to me, because why go through all of this process and
make sure.
only to find out that it's not legal, whatever that might be. So I think we would need to get some legal clarification, I should say, on what exactly the law says. you must and must not do?
Mr. Jordan?
I think you said, Mr. Chairman, that it's going to be 5 districts, right? So based.
By the charter, it is 5 districts.
Okay, so we're going to only have 5 districts. So if we were to come up hypothetically with a different district, minority, majority, if you will, then one of those districts would have to go away. You just have to stick with 5. That's what I'm,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Okay.
And he's looking for, again, my understanding and the clarity of Mr. Workman, he's looking for the legal reading of what that means. Is it a conversation to even be had if it's not legal? And that is, and it's not that we're doing it, it's not that we're not doing it, it's a legal reading of what it means, correct?
Yes, especially with the shortened time frame that we'll be working with, that as we go into that shortened time frame with the data, we can know what the rules are as they exist and be able to make decisions based on that information.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, as a follow-up to Ms. Wilson's comment, in pure fairness to staff, I'm okay with the legal scenario. Want to be very clear that we're not asking staff to opine on the commissioner's recommendation. We're not asking staff's opinion relative to that scenario. I think that's putting them in an unfair scenario. The decisions belong to the body sitting around this table, and so the technical parameters perfectly fine with that scenario, and just want to make sure that we're very clear what we ask. I can probably see Abby's stomach hurting over there a little bit as she tries to ascertain, what this question is as she pens a memo on a fairly controversial subject on behalf of a request made by one of her bosses, right? And so in fairness to them, just want to make sure we're extremely clear about the limitations of what we're asking.
Purely a legal reading.
Yeah.
That's what it
Mr. Chairman, that's why I asked for that when Josiah was discussing it. I just think that has to come first.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm amenable to both Mrs. Schmidt and Mr. Moore's comments. I'm purely wanting the legal reading.
Yeah. Further comments? Abby, do you have a clear understanding of what your charge is if we should move this forward?
Just to make sure I have that, I'm going to look into and just address the legal consequences, if any, of this proposal of a minority-majority district, and just the legal ramifications, any consequences, if there are rules, regulations. I can prepare a memo to that effect, yes.
That's correct. So that being the motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Show the motion carries. Now for your second motion.
I would like to motion that the staff and attorneys, again, look into the taxation consequences of what districts would create. My understanding is there are 24 different pots of money that are taxed across the different districts, that we just have a understanding of what things we need to keep in mind. Again, another legal reading of what exists for taxation purposes.
Questions? Comments? Clear understanding?
I'm curious, do you have to draw lines to figure that taxation purposes, or how do you do that?
You're
If you
saying
don't
over
take
the current.
if you don't take the existing districts?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
My understanding is that the districts somewhat determine where money is allowed to be spent. So there are certain monies which are tied to the actual geographic boundaries of the district, or at least a portion of it is tied to the geographic boundaries of the district. Others are just general taxation districts. And so my concern would be that if we, say, took one district that was mostly agricultural or something like that, that we may skew the amount of taxation that might be in a particular district or other districts, that we would try to think about an equitable distribution of tax monies across districts, so that way we don't have vast inequities in the district taxation.
Ms. Schmidt?
And I understand why you're asking that, but there are, and you're correct, there are a lot of districts, but a lot of those districts were done by referendum. And some of those districts, and I'll give you a good example, District 4, Parks and Recreation, is not where it was originally. Having been the commissioner of District 4 when I was elected the first time, the district went up and included Canaveral Groves. Well, today that's not the case, obviously. So you have a lot of the districts that were voted on that you cannot just switch those districts unless you want to put it back on referendum and say, do we do away with it and move it someplace else? Now, there are some. I mean, you have MSTU for law enforcement. So that's a whole different story. And that was done for a particular reason. The cities sued the county. But at that point, I don't think, I mean, you can certainly get a legal opinion on that if you want, but I think you're talking about a lot of problems, a lot of issues trying to move some of those districts around.
Go ahead.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, my intention is not to try to move the districts, it's to understand the districts as a body. My understanding is there are certain things such as flooding, that are flooding mitigation funds, I'm using the wrong term because I just am blanking on the term, that are distributed by district. And so, for example, in District 2 right now, there are certain issues with, they have large portions of Merritt Island, and therefore they may be disproportionately affected by flooding, and those funds may be used up faster than other particular districts. My goal would be to understand which particular funds are tied to the geographic boundaries of the districts which we would draw versus those that would be unaffected, such as the recreation district that you mentioned, where we have, I believe, 3 recreation districts, like a central district, a south district, and another district.
Districts.
Yes, and so we would know which ones that we are affecting, particularly in the example that I can think of off the top of my head of the flooding mitigation funds, that we wouldn't create a district that would be all island and therefore use up all of their funds very quickly and not be able to address the needs that they have.
But to Mr. Fisher's point, you'd be basing that off of the current drawing of the districts, because there's no, I mean, we don't have anything in place for now.
There are certain, my understanding is there are certain pots that would be tied to whatever district we would draw. So regardless of where District 4 ended up, there would be certain amounts of monies that would be tied to the geographic boundaries of, let's say, District 4, for example, or District 2, to understand what those would be so that we could look across.
Yeah. That's pretty hard to do, but
Abby?
I'll leave that up to the staff.
Well, okay, so I have looked at MSTUs, and I can tell you that there's a breakdown. Certain MSTUs that are coterminous, so if District 1 was redrawn to include different boundaries, the MSTU actually gets redrawn automatically. However, there are some MSTUs that actually have legal descriptions, so we would have to, take some action to affect any changes that way. So I know about the MSTUs. I was just talking to Jim about if there was anything outside of MSTUs as far as tax consequences, I would have to get with the budget office about those pots of money, because I'm not familiar so much to that detail. But that would be, I would do my best to put something together. I'd be concerned I would not be as comprehensive as perhaps this committee would want, but I'd do as much as I could. The MSTUs, obviously, I have started to look into a little bit, and I do know that it just depends on which one it is, whether it's coterminous and you just redraw and it kind of pops into that district, or if we have an issue where it's actually a legal boundary.
So you're going to have to take the current districts, though?
Yes, you have. That's where we would start from,
Right,
absolutely.
Because you don't have any other assumptions to make from.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, that would be data that you could consider if you change District 1 drastically, or whatever district it would be, how we would have to address that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I must, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I must be the only person sitting here that do not know what MSTUs. Please, what does that acronym mean?
That is a municipal service taxing unit. So it's a unit that is statutory that we can set up in a boundary, and we pick a geographic boundary. And sometimes it's a district, it's entire District 1, or it's actually a geographical boundary that's a legal description. And you provide municipal services, and you actually tax those property owners in that particular boundary for certain services like water, all sorts of different services that we provide, and they're municipal services that we provide in those particular boundaries. So it does vary. So you kind of start with the concept, and then you have 2 different types. One that actually gets tied to District 1, and if District 1 changes, it kind of just goes with it, or you actually have a narrower geographical boundary, but it's just it's an entity that's a statutory creation, that you can do these, you can raise revenues. Sorry about that.
All right, Chairman, you may know this, but I sometimes just talk straight, and we're pussyfooting around what we're really asking for, and I'm going to help you out. I have not thought about this at all. I didn't even know this was on a table of discussion about minority district. I wasn't watching that, and I missed the last meeting. The consequence he's looking for is if we inadvertently or purposefully draw a district that has a significantly lower income per capita, will we possibly affect how much money they have to spend on their district? So obviously this came from you thought through this minority district. Do we inadvertently create one district that has a significantly lower income, therefore taxable dollars coming in, that affects their services? And therefore, what is the consequence of that? None of that is my opinion, or I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I just simply would like to get it on the table. That's all we're asking. That's all he's asking is, if we draw a district that is considerably less income, will they be adversely affected based on the taxable dollars they generate for their district? Am I right?
Yes, Mr. Worker.
Boom.
You gonna drop the mic?
So with that,
So should I amend would it be better if I amended my motion to understand the list of MSTUs that are locked into the geographical boundaries of districts that we would draw?
I think that would be much better useful, because otherwise you're basing it off of current districts. So yes, I think that would be useful, and I think that's useful for a multitude of purposes, yes.
So a list of MSTUs that are locked into the districts of whatever we would draw as a committee.
Yes. Is there a question to that? Now, granted, Abby, you got to decide if the MSTU, I mean, if it's locked into a district, or if it's defined by boundary that won't change, you're going to have to break those out and define them separately, correct?
I would. I think if I may, I would just give you a memo showing the MSTUs that are identifiable that we have, and break it down further as far as whether it moves with the district or whether it's actually a geographic. I would give you all that information.
And where they currently lie.
Just so you would
Yeah.
know.
And
Okay.
also show the referendum districts. So.
Yes, okay. So that being the motion,
As rephrased by.
Abby, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Vice Chair Minus was a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, so the motion carries. Further discussion from the committee before we go to public comment. Mr. Jordan?
The only thing I was thinking about was Joshua came up with two options, or something we should think about. I'm just wondering what else is out there that we should be thinking about. You know, this could be as small as those two, or it could be as large as 100 things that we can look at. Because I'm thinking, just based on what he's saying, what if, you know, I think he was looking to make sure everything is balanced, and I think I heard him say that if you got 5 districts, then you should have monies that's basically equally distributed. That's not the way it works, but I think that's what you were looking for, and that's never going to happen, because we just have industry in certain areas and not in other areas. So I think we should just keep our options open. There's going to be other questions, I think, as we go along the line, but
Absolutely.
it's a good start, though.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Based on that, Chairman, if I may ask, what is the process between now and the time we schedule our next meeting, that if we do have a brainstorm and have a question about, you know, maybe when we go figure out how to use this software, and we're like, hey, can I do 4 rectangles, or, you know, does triangles count? I have a question. What would be the process of submitting that question based on Sunshine to the committee for?
I think, you know, Jim and Abby, you let us know. I mean, is that something that can be submitted to y'all directly that could be, you know, dispersed to the committee? You know, I mean, I don't want to make it to where Abby's uncomfortable with, you know, us not doing motions and having, I mean, but obviously what he was asking for, I think, is pretty detailed information. You know, Mr. Workman's asking for, can you draw circles and squares? It's a little more elementary for him, but, but listen, I think that's part of, understanding the process of being able to draw, and use the software and that sort of thing. But Abby, is there a preferred way that we can do this so that we, or Jim, that we can do this without calling a formal meeting to do motions?
Yeah. And if Abby grabs the mic away, don't be shocked. For any general questions or anything, I'm a good contact. Send it to me, and we can get out to the group, especially. And then if we send out to everything, we blind carbon copy. So even though we remind you all not to send it to everybody else, but the other thing is just to be careful of. And I don't know any way but be blunt. Is we as staff are giving staff direction without the committee voting, saying that's the direction you want staff to work on. So. Yeah,
and listen, I think anything that's asked of y'all should be for informational purposes only. Right. You should never be put in a position that you're making a quote-unquote decision. It should be a legal, type decision that comes from you that lays out the parameters of this committee and what our charge is. And anything that falls under that umbrella, I think you're very safe to answer that. If not, Todd's given us the permission to call a meeting.
And if I just add, just caution that if we do issue a response to the committee, obviously we don't, it's just you all individually, please don't start responding back and forth, and because that would be a sunshine issue.
Correct.
So emails that are sent out to the group are for the group, but please don't respond back to the group. If you have a question, call Jim or call myself. Please don't start to have a conversation inadvertently online.
Don't reply all.
Yes, reply all is not your friend.
Yeah. Any further comments from the committee itself before we go to public comment? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment. I do have 2 cards. Ms. Bradley Craig, do you have comment? No? Well, thank you for being here. Commissioner Lober, I have a card from you.
Make sure the audio works here. Everyone can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, first, good evening. I appreciate everyone being here. I'm happy I'm not on this board because where I am, I typically only have to convince 2 people that I'm right in order to get what I want. You all have a much harder task than I do with respect to that. I have a few notes here that kind of disjointed, so bear with me. I definitely want to cover a couple of topics here. I'm not one normally to put in a public comment card. I think this is the first one that I can recall having put in at least a year anywhere. Now, that said, I did a little recon as this meeting was going on because I agree with probably what you all are feeling, that it's unfortunate that everyone doesn't have a license to the software that's specific for redistricting. I'll be honest, I don't know how that software was picked by the county at first. I could find out if anyone's interested. But at this point, where we're at, it does look like each license costs about $4,500. What I can tell you, I don't know what the other districts' budgets are, but I am way under budget in my district, as I pretty typically am. For my district, I can certainly pony up to get 1 license. So anyone that wants to come into my office, we have an extra terminal. You can just come to my office if that's more convenient. If I hear from any of my 3 outside of this meeting or inside the meeting that that's what they want, I'll buy my district a license. So you can come into North Merritt Island, or if it's more convenient to come into Viera, go for that too. If it's truly critical, if you meet with me, I'm sure I can scrounge up $9,000 more. I'd prefer not to spend it if we don't need it, though. So if it's a little inconvenient, I just ask, let's try to keep it down and keep it at the $4,500. You may want to check with your commissioners that have appointed you in the other districts if that's something that they can afford. Maybe they can. As far as the population growth, one thing I was wondering, and I was sitting next to Sandra, and we were chatting about it for a moment. Todd Bakriva is kind of the brain in the room with respect to population growth, because from everything that I've heard, and again, I'm speculating in part, disproportionately D4 has grown in population. So by extension, D4 is going to have to shrink. Now, does that mean D1 is going to come down from the west? Does it mean that I'm going to come in from the east? maybe one, maybe both, maybe something different, maybe nothing precludes you from moving me up north on the east side to eat up D1 and then giving D1 a huge section on the west, or vice versa. There are a lot of different things that can be done, but I think the overarching theme from what I've heard from everyone that has a basis to have an opinion on this, D4 has grown in population. There's no question. So whatever thought process you have, if it doesn't involve a majority-minority district or a 7-district option, certainly I would have in mind coming into D4 from one or more directions. Now, with respect to something else that came up, I would ask, and certainly if you don't want to do it, don't do it, but I would ask that you just consider before the meeting concludes whether or not you want to allow for the possibility of having another meeting prior to the census data coming in. And what I'm thinking is when Abby gets you the legal opinion or the legal opinions, I should say, from the county attorney's office, once those are disseminated to you all and you have a couple weeks to digest them, you may want to meet to discuss that, because to me there are a couple of the options have already come up, or a couple of the issues have already come up here, actually since I put in the public comment card. And there's one issue that didn't yet come up that I think you all, before you even worry about how to draw the districts, kind of have to get down to figure out whether you're going to waste your time or not. One of them that didn't come up is, do you count jail population? You can, you don't have to, but that could tremendously alter the boundaries in the northern part of my district and the southern part of D1. Now, if you want to make that decision before you start playing with the district boundaries, it may be something worth discussing. As far as the 5-district and 7-district idea that was floated by, I've never committed that I like one idea better than the other. I've just been open to that, as I have been to the majority-minority district, to looking at whatever it is. I don't think anyone, and if Josiah thinks I'm wrong, I invite him to correct me on this, because really the idea originated with him. I don't think anyone has suggested that this group should not put forth a 5-district map. Now, I think what Josiah was looking at, and what may or may not be something that you all are interested in, is over and above producing that 5-district map, knowing that we have charter review coming up, and there would, in all likelihood, need to be charter review changes, and that we don't have these two coinciding all that often between redistricting and charter review. Do you want to, over and above doing your job and giving a 5-district option, or the 5-district path, do you also want to give them a 7-district option, so that should charter review decide that's a great maneuver, and should it go through the process, which frankly it may or may not, that there's something they can go to immediately without having to wait years before the next redistricting? I can't tell you if that's good or bad, because I don't know. I've provided Josiah a ton of info. I'm sure he'll share that with you if that's something you all are interested in. But that's my take on that. As far as the majority-minority district, Susan alluded to this, and I know Josiah used the term packing to refer to it. There are two sides, though, and I think it's important to bear in mind, regardless of what you do, that, yeah, there is very clearly a potential downside in concentrating one or more particular minorities or one or more particular protected classes all in one district, because you're essentially precluding them influencing the other districts. You're forcing a disproportionate share of them in one particular district, and I think like Susan said, they're going to be the lone person on the commission. But the other side to that equation, the flip side of the coin, is if you go the other extreme, you could say that you're diluting their influence by spreading them out so far and having so few in each commission district that they really don't have as much of a say as they would in the one district. I don't know how that equation comes out, but I think it's something worth considering. And as to what Josiah mentioned, and I appreciate his having done so with respect to the flooding concerns and the MSTU dollars, I venture to guess that part of that came from a discussion or a couple discussions that we had prior to his having been appointed. North Merritt Island, and Steve, I know, or Mr. Chair, I know you are very well familiar with North Merritt Island and the flooding concerns. West Cocoa is another one, in fact, where D1 meets with D2, where we have huge flooding costs, and the disproportionate or the lion's share of the stormwater funds that I have in D2 have to go to North Merritt Island or West Cocoa. Yeah, we have a little pocket in Rockledge that has problems right where it meets up with the municipality, but by and large, there are areas that are very concentrated where my stormwater money for D2 has to be spent. So if you give me another area or any commissioner that's similarly situated that has those same sort of concerns where they're spending almost all of their stormwater money in pockets of their district, if you give me a similar area like that, not only will that area suffer, but North Merritt Island, where I already have to spend the money, and West Cocoa would suffer as well. I don't know if flooding is a concern to the same degree in every other district. I'm sure there are probably other concerns that are just as important to them that may be affected by concentrating small areas where you don't have the demographics on there to show, well, this area floods, this area doesn't flood. You can see perhaps income, you can see perhaps ethnicity, but it doesn't show you where the deluge is. So I don't know to the degree you want to factor in topography, but certainly from a financial standpoint, it's not just that being in the bottom of a bowl is a faux pas. There's an actual cost to being at the bottom of the bowl and including that in a district. Beyond that, I know Abby's going to murder me for this, but I say this with love. There is an option, and I do want to qualify this very heavily, that you need to be really, really careful if you choose to exercise this option. You can, without violating sunshine, and Abby, maybe you want to send them all the memo from Scott Knox. I can send it to you if you don't have it, that discusses this, and I certainly would read it before you do anything on this basis. You can send out memos amongst the entire group here between meetings. You cannot ask for commentary, and what I do when I send out memos of that variety, I include the actual county attorney opinion on the back end of the memo, or I reference it, and I specifically say, please do not even acknowledge receipt of this. If you have a situation where, let's say, Kendall sends out a memo and then Josiah sends out a memo that touches on some subject Kendall's touched on, that's where you can run into problems. But if you have something that you know is particular to your district or something that you think is unlikely anyone else will be concerned about or think of, nothing precludes you from sending a memo if you follow the guidance in that particular memo. So just some things to think about. Beyond that, I understand that I have 3 appointees on here. There are other folks on here that I know well. There are other folks that I don't know quite as well. If there's something that my office can do for you guys, whether or not I've appointed you, reach out. The fact is, this is a county-wide endeavor, and I don't think there need to be little fiefdoms in terms of, me trying to give one particular portion an advantage over another. I think it's a common goal to try to get this thing drawn fairly. So to the extent that I can do anything, or if you think I might be able to do something, reach out, and I'd be happy to at least try to help y'all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Commissioner. Couple of points on what the commissioner said. Certainly, it's his prerogative to spend some of his resources for one of the licenses, and I mean, we can certainly mention that to the other commissioners when it comes time to actually have access. I mean, because clearly we're all going to be potentially, if we're wanting to sit down at a computer, trying to sit down and do this in a very short time frame. So thank you for your offer on that, Commissioner. You did talk about D4. I think we all recognize that D4 is going to be the one that shrinks due to its population growth. You had talked about, Commissioner, the next meeting, and that's why I wanted that motion amended to be to where we could call that meeting, at the call of the chair, just because there could be information that comes about that could be useful to this committee to come sit in a room for a little bit and talk about. So we'll certainly keep that in mind. We keep going back to the 5, 6, 7 district conversation. Clearly, as mentioned, the charter says 5 districts. You are going through charter review. Abby, is there anything statutorily from the state on number of districts? I know Miami-Dade has been blocked, in a way to where they don't fall under the 5 district rule, but statutorily, where are we on that?
There is a provision in state law under Chapter 124, it's 124.011, which does discuss the possibility of having 7 commissioners, where actually you still have 5, and then you have 2 at large. I have not looked into that too much because of Charter Section 2.1, which limits us to 5 at this time. But there is a provision in state law that does discuss that.
Okay.
Provides
All right.
for that.
And again, we're not married to any of this. Obviously, right now, we're married to the charter that we're operating under, but there's going to be a discussion that takes place on the charter review, and certainly that could be something that comes before us. at that point in time. Certainly, I'm not a fan of growing government, but, we certainly don't need to be represented by one person either. So there's a fine balance, and I think understanding, the size of different counties and the size of their commissions may, help us as we move along, and that can be some self-reflection you do and some studying up on some things as well. And I don't think that's something that's out of the purview of asking, our council, what counties have, 6 or 7 commissioners and how many people are in those counties, so we get an idea of what that looks like as well. So, I think those are questions that can easily be answered by staff that don't trip any thresholds that, we might feel uncomfortable operating in. So, with that, is there any other further public comment? Seeing none. All right. Well, we'll be, reaching out to the membership through email. Staff will communicate the answers to the motions that have been put before this committee tonight. And obviously, if anything else comes about in the meantime, we'll be reaching out to you. Otherwise, without objection, Mr. Jordan shows we're adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.